This episode is a 2-for-1 as we talk about forgotten 80s TV show toys and some of the forgotten TV shows that they came from. So, stick around. Hello fellow dorks and dorkettes, and welcome to Nostalgia Syndrome. My name is Rob, and in this episode we will be taking a look at some forgotten 80s TV show toys. And for a first, we will be putting a spotlight on one manufacturer in general, and that is ERTL. ERTL is a toy company that has been around since 1945, and they're pretty famous for their die-cast and agricultural toys. So, that being said, all the toys on this list are die-cast, cars, trucks, what have you. Now, ERTL is still going strong. Actually, in 2011, they were bought out by Tomy, and Tomy is still continuing a lot of their licenses and manufacturing. One of the things I've noticed while researching forgotten toys of the 80s was that ERTL really took a lot of chances with the licenses that they got for various movies and TV shows. Now this time, like I said, we're focusing on TV shows, but in the future, some of the movie toys that ERTL produced in the 80s are very surprising because they're from movies that you would never think in 100 years that would actually have a toy line. So ERTL, big props for the chances you took over the years, and we're going to take a look at some of those chances now with these forgotten TV shows that have spawned forgotten TV show toys. Now, our first die-cast vehicles from ERTL was for a somewhat forgotten TV show titled Matt Houston. Now, Matt Houston aired in 1982, and it ran for 3 seasons all the way up to 1985, where it had 69 episodes to its credit. This Aaron Spelling-produced crime drama, if you will, kind of followed the tried-and-true formula of private investigator shows throughout the late 70s and 80s. And in that, Nick Horsley played a Texas oil tycoon that moonlights as a private investigator on the side. So on a weekly basis, you got to see him live this rich oil tycoon extravagant lifestyle while also slumming it out as a private investigator just for fun. So that is shown within these toys because you have 2 ERTL die-cast vehicles. One is this Excalibur, fancy, millionaire-looking roadster, and the other is this Ford Bronco. So you have both sides of the coin, the rich and the private investigator. To be honest, I have a just slight recollection of this show and no recollection at all for these vehicles. But what I do remember was that it came on kind of late, like when I was on my way to bed, and my mind just chalked it up as an old person show. But, I mean, I love those 80s PI shows, so if I ever stumble upon it, I'll definitely give it a watch. Anyway, like I said, these 2 vehicles kind of represent the yin and yang of the rich private investigator, and I think that's pretty cool. I mean, they're just very nice looking die-cast vehicles, and they would find a home in any Matchbox or Hot Wheels collection. Our second forgotten 80s TV show toy from ERTL comes from the TV show Riptide. First airing in 1984 on NBC, Riptide ran for 3 seasons and had a total of 58 episodes. Now, Riptide was about 2 Vietnam veteran friends who were kind of beach bums / private investigators that solved many cases with their friend Boz, who was a technical genius and had a pretty awesome robot. Now, all their operations were out of their ship, the Riptide. Now, surprisingly, ERTL never released a Riptide toy, but they did release toys for the 1960s Corvette that our heroes would drive around in, and their most iconic of vehicles, the Screaming Mimi, which was their rundown pink Stworsky helicopter. Now, they would pilot this thing to solve their many cases, and it was one of the highlights of the show. Now, you could buy these two vehicles separately, but they also released a 3-pack that had the Corvette, the Screaming Mimi, and kind of a generic truck that I'm sure they drove at some point in the show. Now, I have a wonderful recollection of this show because of when the USA Network would air it. I can envision many just aimless summer days of watching Riptide, and I love those memories of that time period and of that show. Now, I cannot comment on how beloved the show was in its original release, or if most people remember it from its time in syndication. Anyway, I loved Riptide, and the Screaming Mimi is an awesome TV show vehicle, and I would love to find this die-cast replica of it at some point. Our third forgotten 80s TV show toy comes from probably one of the more popular TV shows on this list, and that is Fall Guy. Airing on ABC from 1981 all the way up to 1986, Fall Guy had 5 seasons and a total of 113 episodes. Now, Fall Guy, I have fond memories of its original airing. I mean, I was a super big fan of Lee Majors, who played Colt Seaver, who was a Hollywood stuntman who, on the side, for extra pocket money, would go after bail jumpers. And it was never as simple as that, because most of these bail jumpers were embroiled in some bigger mystery or scheme or adventure that Colt had to partake in to save the day. Now, as a side note, I saw recently a trailer for a movie version of the Fall Guy, and I don't know what to think. It looks like a fun adventure movie, but it just doesn't feel like my Fall Guy, you know what I mean? Anyway, to the toys. ERTL produced 6 toys in total, in various sizes. You had 2 of your typical sized die-cast vehicles, one being Colt's world-famous truck, and you also had this white Firebird. They also had larger scale versions of the truck and Firebird that featured different play features like working winch, real-life suspension, and motorized. Anyway, to me, Colt's brown GMC truck is a very iconic 80s TV show vehicle. I mean, honestly, up there with Knight Rider and the A-Team's van, in my opinion, just because of how much I love the show. Our 4th TV show on the list is Hardcastle and McCormick. And I would say this is probably a forgotten show for most people. Now, this show aired on ABC from 1983 to 1986, so 3 seasons with a total episode count of 67. Now, Hardcastle and McCormick was known for its vehicle, the Coyote X. And before we get into the synopsis of the show, I found it quite interesting that this super elite looking sports car was actually built on the chassis of a Volkswagen Bug, at least for the first season. Its body was completely custom, but its engine was from a Porsche 914. But for its 2nd and 3rd seasons, it was based on a DeLorean DMC-12. Anyway, onto what the show was about. Hardcastle and McCormick was about Judge Hardcastle, who was a strict, by-the-book judge, who was getting ready to retire. He notices that he has, case files of 200 cases where the criminal walked free. Now, that didn't sit well with him, and in his retirement, he thought, boy, it would be a fun hobby to track down these 200 criminals and bring them to justice. Then along comes McCormick, Skids McCormick. a car thief slash race car driver who has just recently been incarcerated for stealing the Coyote X, which was a new developmental vehicle that his murdered best friend developed. So he was looking at a lot of hard time until Judge Hardcastle said, "Hey dude, I won't send you to jail if you help me track down these 200 evil criminals." I mean, that sounds like a pretty cool plot to me. Now, ERTL released 3 versions of the Coyote X. One is in your typical diecast scale. The next was in a 1/16 diecast. And the third one was a pullback and release plastic version of the Coyote X. So, I mean, all 3 of these look awesome. Pullback, I mean, an awesome play feature that never gets old until the gears burn out. And again, this is a show that I remember when it came on. I mean, like, the opening had the Coyote X jumping over another car, a la Dukes of Hazzard, and title card appears. And I remember seeing that and just knowing it was bedtime, and like I said, it was an old person show. So I had to scurry off to bed, and I can't even recall if anyone in my family actually watched this. I would assume my grandfather probably did, because he loved shows like this. Anyway, Hardcastle and McCormick, I mean, with a premise like that, I think I'd like to check it out. So I'll have to see if it's streaming anywhere or can be found anywhere. But until then, let's get to our 5th and final ERTL diecast vehicle. Our 5th and final Forgotten 80s TV show toys from ERTL comes from probably the most popular of all of them that we've talked about, and that is Airwolf. Now, Airwolf ran from 1984 to 1987 with 4 seasons, and it had a total of 79 original episodes. Now, the one thing that was odd about Airwolf was Stringfellow Hawk, who was Jan Michael Vincent, quit after the 2nd season, so they replaced him with another good-looking all-American actor, and by the time the 3rd season wrapped, CBS canceled the show. Now, the USA Network picked it up for its 4th and final season. I always found that odd. I mean, for one thing, the star of the show that you knew and loved walked out because the original creators of the show also left. So I guess he knew it just wasn't going to be the same show and walked away. So that little tumultuous history aside, Airwolf was an excellent show, and I loved this show. I remember staying up late to watch the first pilot movie and just loving it. I mean, everything from Airwolf itself, which was a high-tech, cutting-edge military helicopter, to Jan Michael Vincent and Ernest Borgnine. I mean, they were a great duo that worked well together, and they both piloted the Airwolf, and yeah, a lot of awesome adventures were to be had. Week after week, the show delivered awesome helicopter combat that unfortunately recycled a lot of stock footage. But all that aside, it was a great show. Now, ERTL only produced 4 diecast vehicles for Airwolf. One of those, of course, was Airwolf itself. It was a single carded vehicle diecast of the awesome attack helicopter. The other was a 3-pack that featured Airwolf and a Santini helicopter with Santini Jeep that featured a red, white, and blue Americana motif. Anyway, there were other companies that released Airwolf toys, but these ERTL diecast toys were the first on the market, being released in 1984. Of course, any memorabilia from Airwolf would be welcomed on my shelf and in my collection. Love the show, love the helicopter, and it's just really sad that such a strong show kind of went out with a whimper on the USA Network. Thank you so much for stopping by and checking out these forgotten 80s TV show toys. That some of them were spawned from TV shows that are forgotten, at least nowadays. Now, I could have given such bigger and bolder synopsises of these shows, but I didn't want to be bogged down in that when we needed to be talking about these awesome die-cast toys from ERTL. I hope this episode doesn't come off as kind of weird, because we are casting a spotlight on one toy manufacturer, but it just struck me as an interesting topic while I was doing some research. I mean, ERTL, like I said, took some real chances with their licenses. Now, some of these weren't chances at all, like Airwolf, while others, mostly in their movie side of things, were taking really big chances, and I can't wait to talk about those at a later date. And yes, some of these shows had very iconic vehicles, but these shows didn't last very long or have a lasting impression on 80s pop culture in general. So, like I said, props to ERTL for at least trying and for making some really awesome die-cast toys along the way for these forgotten shows. Anyway, thanks again for stopping by, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please give me a thumbs up. You got something to say? Please leave a comment. I love reading them, and I love getting back to everybody. And if you're new around here and you enjoyed this or any of the episodes that YouTube is recommending down here, please hit subscribe. And if you hit that little bell icon, you'll be notified whenever there's a new episode. So anyway, until next time, thanks for watching. Keep being rad and stay dorky.